Hello, friends and family. For my first interview podcast, I really wanted to save it for somebody that was meaningful to me. I met Scott McCarthy a couple of years ago through a business networking app. And you know how I am about starting things with intention. As soon as I met this guy, I knew that I wanted to build a business relationship with him, and I knew that we were going to be able to help each other grow. So if you jumped onto my podcast in the early days because you wanted to be part of something new and special that was building, it's the same reason why you should check out my friend Scott McCarthy and his Moving Forward Leadership podcast. But what's really interesting about Scott is that he brings a leadership perspective that we don't learn anywhere else in the Agile world. And this is something that many of you know has fascinated me for a long time. How do people who are in the most extreme circumstances, where failure is truly not an option, where the stakes are high and lives are on the line, how do they behave and act in ways that ensure success every time? And how can we apply those lessons not only to Agile and agility, but to our development in leadership in general? That's this week on the Badass Agile podcast. Greetings, team. Welcome to the Badass Agile podcast. I'm your host, Chris Williams. Greetings, team, and welcome back. This is my first interview podcast since I started it 2 years ago. And for my first one, I wanted the guest to be special. Now, you know what I say. You have to surround yourself with inspiration every day. What that means to me is you have got to constantly be talking to, reading about, listening to other leaders who've got different perspectives that can help shape and strengthen your game. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine, and he did me the service of having me on his podcast a few weeks ago. His name's Scott McCarthy from Moving Forward Leadership. You can find him at movingforwardleadership.com. And I'm going to let him tell his story. Scott, are you there?
Hey, I'm here, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How about you?
Oh, I am super honored super stoked to be on Badass Agile. Listen to you religiously. So
thanks, brother. Likewise.
Yeah, this is awesome. Can't wait.
This is great. And you know what? It's funny. I was checking out your Facebook this morning, something about a workout at 5:15 a.m. And I've actually got an episode called 5:15 a.m. And it talks about if you're not getting up at 5:15 a.m. to do your boxing workout, to get after it, and somebody else will. So I love that you were, and did I hear you say you're doing second workout today?
Yeah, I did. I did it. Crazy. Yeah,
well, now I got to go back downstairs and do my second workout of the
day. Yeah, Scott, I did too today.
Welcome. And thanks for agreeing to be part of this show. Real pleasure to have you here. So can I get you to run through your bio and background? Let the listeners know, how did you get where you are today? What is your unique story? And include something about the vision and purpose of MFL, the coaching and the podcast, so that listeners know what they're getting into.
Yeah, 100%. So, I'll go back to where it all started and say, I grew up on the East Coast, a very small outport town, Newfoundland, literally an hour and a half from the most easterly part of North America, and wanted to do something different in my life. And I jokingly say, I want to do something so different that I joined the one organization where they make you all the same, right?
Yep.
But everybody back home was either going to Memorial University or College North Atlantic or running off the work. And I knew it wasn't just for me. It was just not for me. So I learned about the Royal Military College. Said, hey, that's where I'm going. That's what I'm doing. And I don't care what it takes to get there. And that's what I did. So the day after high school, literally, I walked into a recruiting office and signed my life away on the dotted line and started serving this country at 18 years old.
That's amazing. And hey, let's take a moment, by the way, listeners, to remember something. Everyone says, hey, thanks for your service. We should actually take a moment to remember that the sons and daughters and the husbands and wives and the brothers and sisters that don't make it back are making the same commitment as brothers like Scott right here. The only difference is, thank goodness, Scott, you're here safe with us today. But thank you. When I say thank you, I mean thank you for your service to this country and to everyone who does what you do.
Thanks for that, Chris. And for a guy who has friends who have not made it home, that actually means a lot to us when people go out and say those things.
I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. So joined, went to Royal Military College, graduated in 2006 as a Army logistics transportation officer, and headed out to my first deployable unit in Edmonton, Alberta, 1st Service Battalion. And then fast forward a couple of years, lots of great experience leading out there, and got selected to go to Kandahar, Afghanistan, as a part of a shouldn't say special mission, a different mission. And we can definitely dive in. I think we'll dive in a bit more of that. But Cole's Notes version of that was I was training Afghan soldiers over in Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah, come back home, and then gears started rolling, and I was like, and I'm still doing the Army thing today, but I knew I wanted to do something extra. Failed at a couple different things, and then Moving Forward Leadership was born about 3 years ago now. And essentially, the whole vision of Moving Forward Leadership is just helping people become better leaders, because I've seen it, and I know you've seen it. There's just way too many bosses out there, man.
Yep.
There's way too many, and sometimes it's their fault, and a lot of other times it's not. It's just they don't have the experience, they don't have the mentors to go to. They just don't know where to turn, and when you don't know what to do, you do what you know, and unfortunately, it's generally bad examples. So I'm there to hopefully help bridge that gap and make people just realize that, hey, there are different ways out there of doing business. I don't have to be that yeller, the screamer, the ultra demanding boss that everybody just can't stand when they walk into the room. Right. I can inspire, I can motivate, I can lead. So yeah, that's Cole's Notes version quickly.
No, got it 100%. Because that kind of leadership just is not in style anymore. It just doesn't work, right? Nobody's buying that.
No, and especially this day and age. And, we can have a full podcast episode talk about millennials and even before millennials. I don't even buy it myself, honestly. And I'm not a millennial. I'm more of the Zennials they refer to, in between Gen X and millennial. I never bought it from day one. And the reality is that people just need to put their egos away, grab some humble pie, and realize they don't necessarily know it all. And I'm one of those people, and seek to learn more. And as much as I'm out there helping my audience, I'm learning it as well, because I'm doing research, or I'm bringing in the guests who are experts in their fields.
Yep.
And allowing, sucking this information out of them. And I'm like, holy cow, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And in my last job, where I was a squadron commander of 200 folks, I was like, some principles I was like going the next day and implementing them right away.
Right on. You touched on something. The name of your business is Moving Forward Leadership. So at this point, listeners have got to be wondering, what has this guy with his military background got to do with Agile, and vice versa? But I think moving forward is actually a big concept in the Agile ideal, because it stresses that continuous flow and continuous improvement is actually the goal. So what does Moving Forward Leadership mean to you?
Right. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a couple tangents here, Chris, but I promise for you and your audience, it will go right back to your question.
Go for it. Can't wait.
All right. So growing up, I had this huge interest in Japanese history. All right. So, and side tangent is, I remember when I was in like grade 6 or something like this, I grabbed a book off the shelf in the library. It was called Shogun. I don't know if you know, but Shogun is about 2 inches thick, about 1,500 pages long. And I said to my best friend at the time, like, I'm going to read this book.
Was James Clavel, what was his name?
I can't remember. But anyway, I never read the book, but it just, that was how far back I went, my interest for Japanese history. The side note is that is actually my next buy. I will read that book one day. And
very cool.
Yeah, I'm going to buy it. That's the next book I buy.
Right.
But anyway, fast forward to my time at RMC, I actually took a Japanese history class and like learned about it from a professor there. So when I was actually scoping out and just kind of, brainstorming Moving Forward Leadership before I even had a name, after a couple of other failed attempts at leadership, I know I wanted something. And Scott McCarthy leadership and Scott McCarthy consulting, it just didn't jive with me.
Yes.
With the whole youpreneur phenomenon, I would almost go as far as say almost fad. Chris Drucker may have a different opinion than me, but I knew I didn't want that. And the reason why I didn't want that is because the grand vision for me personally at the end of the day is this survives past me, right?
Mm.
And if it's Scott McCarthy, whatever, we'll call it leadership.
Yep.
If it's Scott McCarthy leadership, the day I decide to quit, because I will quit one day.
Yep.
One day I will give up the podcast, the coaching, the consulting, all this jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's Scott McCarthy leadership, it's going to die with me when I decide to quit.
Right.
And then all this work I've done for all these years before go out the window, unless, I make what's essentially the all-star team, guys like John Maxwell. Well, one in a billion dudes make that level.
Yep.
And the realistic side of me says, well, I would love to, I want to, but am I going to? Maybe not.
Right.
And do I need my name out there like that for the rest of eternity? No, I don't need my name. That's not me. So I went and I was just thinking about it. And this is where this whole Japanese story comes into play now. I was just kind of searching, brainstorming, and I came across a Japanese term called Kaizen.
Yes.
Continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, how do I turn that into something English? And I just like, and I remember at work and it was like, keep pushing forward, and the words just came out one day, keep moving forward. And it was just like, and I literally stopped and people just looked at me and I said, anyway, and then I took a little note quick, and that's how moving forward leadership was born. The whole concept behind it is daily continued improvement as a leader.
Amen. So Mark Devine would call that moving the dial.
Moving the dial, yeah. As a former guest of mine on my podcast, not trying to drop a.
No,
anything.
do it. What episode is that again? What number?
Oh, I forget off the top of my head, but I can definitely find out.
Yeah.
He's in the 40s, 43 off the top of my head.
Perfect. I
believe. But Mark was a guest of mine. But yeah, it's just about continuously improving yourself as a leader. And the reality is at the end of the day, so that you can set everything up to move away. Because one day everybody will leave their organization.
That's right. You got to plan for your own exit.
You got to plan for your own exit.
Right.
100%.
So now let me ask you this. I think moving forward means the same thing to you as it does to me. But people might still be wondering, well, listen, we're not going to run an agile organization the same way the military runs its business, right? The military is shouting orders and it's fall into line and it's, barking drill sergeants and all that. But it really isn't. I think the military, we should be looking to them more because, hey, they've got the inclination, they've got the reason, and they've got the resources to develop leadership as an art and science. So from your perspective, what could the military teach us, us agilists here, about the future of leadership? And what's the big takeaway or takeaways? What have they been so far?
Right. So everybody looks at the military and I find they look at, Gunny Sergeant Hartman, I believe his name is from Stanley Kubrick's movie from Vietnam War. What's the name of it now off the top of my head? God, I can picture the cover.
Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody's picturing Gunny, walking around just yelling at everybody, right? And they're all standing there in line. And well, yeah, that kind of happens from time to time, especially basic training. That really happens.
Yep. But
the big thing that people don't understand about the military is that we actually breed leadership from day one, regardless of what rank you're at. And we tell people right away, you are here. Yes, the soldiers, the foot soldiers, the grounds, the privates in basic training. Yes, their main job is to follow orders for sure, but they're also in that context being groomed to become leaders one day.
That's amazing.
And I don't think people understand that. And the one big takeaway that I preach on my podcast all the time is that if you love something, give her away. Yeah. And what I mean by that is the power of delegation is something that people just can't comprehend until they actually start applying it and using it. And that's one thing that we preach in the military. It's something called mission command. So give your tasks, give your people resources, tell them what your intent is, but let them roll with it. Let them figure out how it's going to get done. Because they may figure it way heck a lot better than what you can think of. It may be quicker. It may use less resources. It may be more efficient. It may be more effective. You never know. But you tell them, all right, this is the end state I want. This is the resources that you're getting. These are your restrictions. These are your constraints, restraints. Come back when you got questions.
Trust your teams.
Trust your team, right? And trust is, it's one of the cornerstones within the military. You got to trust the guy to the left of you, and you got to trust the guy to your right of you, because literally our lives are in each other's hands.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what do you have to let go of in order to groom people the minute they start at the most junior level as leaders? You got to let go of your ego. You can't attach any importance to being the guy, because that's not the point.
100%. And I see this when I coach guys, like, I'm here, I made it. It's mine. I have all the power. And I look at them and go, yeah, let it go. And their face just kind of go blank and they drop and they're just like, what, it's like, does not compute, yeah. Doesn't, it's like, what do you mean? I've worked all this time for all this and you're telling me let it go? I'm like, heck yeah, you got better things to worry about.
Yeah. Amen.
You got to worry about the strategic level stuff. Don't worry about the day-to-day, but just worry about the strategic level. You should be thinking down the road.
Yeah.
Not, working with this little contract here that's worth only a couple $100 or $1,000 or whatever. Mm-hmm. You got to be looking at, breaking into the millions for your organization.
Right. That's amazing. Because where else do we see that attitude? In the corporate world, you just don't see it, right?
No.
Leadership is a prize. It's a trophy.
No, it's not.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that's the general attitude, right? So
yeah, for sure.
That is very, very unique. Now, I listen to your podcast and I've seen you come up with things like forget SMART goals, think power goals. So you're a guy, what I love about your show is that we are literally watching a dude evolve his philosophy in front of us. Right. Yeah. So you're not even sure what's going to work, what's going to stick, but you're coming up with your theories and you're putting them out there and saying, I could be wrong, but I believe it's this. And then as new episodes come out, you're adapting and changing it. So what were some of the ones that the military gifted you that are the foundation of that fledgling philosophy that you're building?
There's a couple things that pop in my mind. The first thing is a 80% solution plans on time or early is better than the 110% solution plan late, right?
Mm-hmm.
My background, like I said, is transport. So timings mean everything to me. And I remember when I was an instructor, just, one of those times giving my guys a couple, the old gunny sergeant feedings and giving them a jacking up, what we like to refer to as jacking up over timings because they missed a couple of timings. Right. And I'm like, lives rest on timings in our life.
Mm-hmm.
So, that plan is, there's never nothing's ever going to be perfect.
Right.
I don't care what anybody says. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. Your plan, what you got there, your concept, your idea, your product, whatever it is, it will never actually be perfect.
Right.
So you got to get it out there sooner than later. It obviously can't be just a hairy-fairy idea. You got to have some thought behind it and actually, build it a bit. But what I'm saying is that the 80% solution, you're ready to go.
Yep. So
it is better today. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but I want to hear more about that. Here's why. In Agile, the first thing we're going to do to you is take away your long-range detail plan.
Right.
Makes sense? So we're going to plan for the next 2 weeks, the next 4 weeks, the next 6 weeks, but what you're going to be doing on the 57th Tuesday of this project is not knowable. We're not even going to try. And that freaks people out because they're like, it's irresponsible to have no plan. And that's where we as Agilists start failing because we can't change minds to say, no, the detailed plan is actually worthless. So here's where people struggle though, because in the military, you can't have no plan. My theory is that it's got something to do with training. That if your plan cannot be 100% detailed, you're resting on the training of the people who execute to figure out those missing pieces as they go so they can adapt. So tell me about how the military treats that balance between planning and training.
Awesome question. And I'm going to throw in a little story for you. So one of my jobs, I was an advisor for basically how we evacuate Canadians out of other countries in the event of some kind of disaster or a catastrophic event. Right?
Like a Tim Horton shutdown.
It's a little bit bigger than a Timmy shutdown. All right. But anyway, so I was actually on an exercise in Beirut, Lebanon with our embassy there. Mm-hmm. And we finished the exercise, and we were doing what we refer to as the after action review. So, what went good, what went bad, how we could improve, blah, 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 blah. So they asked, and they're like, oh, okay, here, military guys, do you have any comments? I said, yeah, I do. I have a training background because I spent 4 years at our logistics training center. I said, and this is how we do it in the military. You need to train for the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be prepared. You need to go through every single potential possibility up and including the worst case scenario. And I said to them, and in this context of an evacuation, the worst case scenario is me and my boys showing up, fully loaded, cock, block, ready to rock, weapons. There's bodies and body bags. And yes, I use those words. And we're coming, we're going to do whatever we need to do to get our Canadian folks out of here.
Right.
And and a lot of people's faces just kind of went blank and white and all this jazz because they just weren't used to that type of mentality.
Right.
But the whole mentality behind it is if you train up to and including the worst case scenario, everything, whatever you face in reality is going to be that much easier.
Right.
So when we actually go ahead and conduct our planning for operations, we have this saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Yep.
Because you don't know what they're going to do in business. You know what? This could be your suppliers. This could be it could be your competition. It could be suddenly the economy. You don't know, right? There's so many different factors out there. It's like even worse than actually in the military of what the enemy is. But no plan's going to survive the enemy. But what you need to do is have the flexibility built into these plans so that you can adjust on the fly. You have an idea. You know where you want to go, i.e. the end state. You have an idea how you're going to get there, but as it goes along, you have the detailed plan for the next 24 hours, 48 hours, but the further out you go, the more vague it gets, right? Because you're not there yet. You don't know what's going to happen between here and next week. Because as we discussed on my podcast, when you're my guest, things may change by the end of this recording. The world may change. We don't know, right? So you just got to continually adapt on the fly. You have an idea where you're going, how you're going to get there, but those hiccups, those bumps along the way, well, you got to adjust for them as you go along. And that's basically how we do it.
Amazing. So I wasn't going to ask you this question. I'm going to throw you a curveball. Tell me about, because this is an area I'm focusing on now with the show.
Yep.
Tell me the impact of training or how the military handles fear, because everyone's got fear. To pretend you're not afraid is a mistake.
100%.
How are we going to work with fear? Because in the Agile world, what we represent is change, and change represents fear. So I could use your help telling me how the military approaches eliminating fear.
It's that whole training for the worst case scenario, right? And that includes the fear of it. So you keep putting those guys in those high stress scenarios. And the way we go about doing it was probably not so acceptable in the business world, like sleep deprivation, not physical abuse, but running the body right down to the ground because you're marching 13 kilometers with full gear.
Right.
All those jazz. But we are training for those worst case scenarios. The worst case scenario is we're in contact with our enemy that's more capable than us. We're on 3 hours of sleep for the past week. We got almost no resources left. Yep. And our communications are intermittent. Like, holy crap, can you ask for any worst scenario in a military context? Heck no. Right. But that's how we train up to that level, right? So when we actually get to the real deal, we're not so scared because, we've been here a bit. It was training, but at least we have an idea. We know who we can rely on, who we can trust. And then we get through those tough times so that we regroup. And all of a sudden he's like, it wasn't that bad.
So how does the leader show up in those situations?
Right. Great. That's a great question. And reality is this is where the leader needs to show not that drill sergeant side of them, but that motivator side, to pump those guys up. Think of Gladiator, the opening scenes right before they go into battle. General Maximus, walking the lines and talking to the troops and getting the boys riled. It's that type of mentality and attitude that a leader needs to have, and that can work in a boardroom setting as well. Sometimes when things are going astray, people are going crazy. They're what we refer to as spinning. They're just going round and round in circles. They're not doing anything. They're trying. It's like, no, the leader needs to be the guy that's calm, the girl that's calm, gets everybody to tone it down. All right. What's the real problem here, folks? Let's look at this. Let's solve this one problem. All this other stuff, that's just noise. Let's forget about that. That's noise. Where's the real actual issue at? And then when the leader is actually that motivator, that calmer, then they can motivate and start allocating tasks, resources to this problem. All of a sudden, people are like, oh, yeah, okay. Confidence starts getting built back up again, right? Motivation starts coming back up. Enthusiasm starts coming back up. And all of a sudden, boom, they're starting knocking down those targets. And all of a sudden, the organization's out of that hotbed.
So now that you're on this, now I got to throw you another curveball because this is too good. Talk to me about failure.
Love failure.
All right. So in your business, we have a mission, right? We may even say things like no man left behind. When we use the word failure in business, people assume it's bad. It's really bad. So we are not allowed to miss on the mission. Whatever the objectives are, we have got to hit them. But what does that end up doing? If we can't hit it, we change the definition of the objective to meet the current reality. How does the military treat failure?
I would love to say, oh, we are completely different. We look at failure in a great way and blah, blah, blah. The reality is no, we're very much like the business world in that we don't like failure neither. However, I can tell you from me, my side of the coin is I love failure.
Okay. Tell me why.
And it goes back to my dad growing up.
Okay.
My dad used to always say, if you don't make mistakes, you're not learning anything.
Right on.
Right. Yeah. And it's just one of those things that, stuck in my mind. And I actually I'm like, all right, let's push hard. And it's okay from time to time, especially on the low risk stuff, right? Those low risk things, go ahead, go try it. It fails, who cares? It's not a big deal. It's no risk. On the high risk stuff, we start caring. But, failure is great as long as you learn something from it.
Right.
And I was asked, like, what did we learn from this? We failed at it, but what did we learn? Okay, we learned we have, our capabilities are only this much, or we need to improve the process this way, or we need to remove this, or we need another resource, or whatever. And one of the things I used to always tell my guys on more of the higher risk things, I'm like, okay, this is important. We can't fail at it, but let's not rush to failure neither. Because a lot of times what people get, they're like, holy cow, we got to get this. We got to get to it right now. We got to get this done ASAP. I'm like, whoa, time out. Slow down. We have time for this. Let's not rush to failure.
Right.
Let's look at this. Let's take our time. Let's do it right. Let's make sure we put it into checks and balances. Let's, scrub it multiple times and look at it from a few different angles to make sure we got the right thing. So, like, to wrap up, I wish I could say, failure is the greatest thing ever. It is, unfortunately, in the grandiose military. We don't like failure. And the reality is the reason we don't like failure is because failure equates dead people. And that's never good in a military context. But we definitely will embrace failure during training.
Yeah.
Sense that, okay, we failed at this task. Why? Let's figure out why, so that if we actually go to operations, that doesn't happen again.
Right. So now you and I are both podcasters.
Yes, sir.
Both entrepreneurs, both coaches, consultants. We're used to failure, right? We both started this thing out thinking, oh man, as soon as people find out about me,
I'm going to be it.
The lid's going to blow off the thing. And of course, at the end of the day, it doesn't really happen that fast. So you could have quit this podcast like 99% of the people after episode 3 or maybe 10 or maybe even 20. But how many episodes are we at now?
I'm going to launch 64 tomorrow.
64. So how many years is that?
That's about 3. I took break. I took about a 4-month break there when our second son was born. So yeah. It's about 3 years in total calendar time.
So 3 years, you ain't quitting.
Nope.
What keeps you moving forward?
So I'll actually go back in time and I mentioned deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan, right? And my whole mission over there, we were part of a organization referred to as the Operational Mentoring Liaison Team. So for 7 months, day in, day out, I was side by side my Afghan counterparts, providing them mentorship on how to conduct logistics operations. Come back home to Canada, find a nice, lovely note saying, "Hey, you're being moved to Borden, Ontario, to this Canadian Forces Logistics Training Center as a cadre commander, so oversaw all of our driver training, and as well as a lead instructor for the transportation officer course." I'm like, cool.
Mhm.
So I go and do that, and I start teaching and leading, teaching and leading, all that type of jazz. I'm like, 2 years of this, I'm starting to like what I'm doing here.
Mhm.
I can see I'm influencing people and helping
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2 failed attempts at leadership consulting, and I talked about how moving forward leadership was a bit porn there. And the reason why, to boil it all down, is just like, you know what? I just enjoy helping people, and yes, I'll admit that, like you kind of hinted at, like, no, I'm not getting the bazillion downloads that I hope I was getting with my podcast. I'm not getting the 50 million emails in my inbox every day. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because when I go and look at my download stats and I see that number, I'm like, I just picture, I'm like, that's how many people that have basically been in an auditorium listening to me talk for an hour or two.
Right.
Right. And I've just impacted that number of lives.
Yeah.
And I can live with that. I can be happy with that. And knowing that, you know what, maybe someday I'll be out there and someone will hear my name and go, "Are you the leadership guy? You're moving for leadership?" That'll be the greatest thing ever. Right? Because I've had that on the military side. And it's crazy. When you're traveling across the world in uniform and all of a sudden you come off an airplane and you see one of your former students there, like, "Hey, sir, how you doing?" Like, oh man, it's the greatest thing ever. And I was at actually almost a year ago now, I was at a conference, logistics conference, and I had this brand new second lieutenant walk up to me. He's like, "You are the greatest thing ever." I'm like, "Who are you? Where do I know you from?" Well, I've given a briefing to all the logistics officer cadets down at RMC once. And I guess I pumped them up a bit. Yeah. And the guy remembered me, and it's been like a year and a half since that time, right? So it's just those moments.
Yeah.
And you go, "Oh, you're impacting people's lives." So yeah, I could have quit. I could have quit long ago when I realized, you know what, this podcasting thing is a heck of a lot harder than what people say it is.
Yep.
Or, well, actually, no, rephrase that, than what I thought it was. When I actually start listening to people and reading, it's like, oh, this is not easy.
Right.
And I could have quit when we had Benjamin born, because I did take a 4-month break, and guess what? It was difficult to come back and get into the swing of things. But no, I'm here. My recording calendar is full, and I'm not trying to gloat or anything, but it should be full. And it's just because, you know what, I'm happy and people want to come. They want to spread their message. I want to extract their lessons, not just for myself, but for everybody out there.
Dude, that is awesome. So for leaders that are listening to this show, the people who are trying to up their game, how can they get some of that fire? How did you find that thing? What would you tell them?
That's a tough question, man. I think when you actually stop looking at the bottom line results, and I'm not saying that's not important, because it is, but when you stop looking at the bottom line results and start looking at the bottom line of your people and how they are they developing? Are they happy? Are they walking up to you and saying, "You're the greatest boss ever"? We may conflict from time to time, but I got a lot of respect for you. When you start seeing them develop, also you start seeing them getting into higher level positions, or maybe not higher level positions, just wanting to better themselves, whatever that definition is for that individual.
Yeah.
As long as they want to develop themselves and become a better version of themselves, you start focusing on that. Then all of a sudden it gets, you start getting addicted to that. And I'm sitting here right now at my desk, and in front of me is a wall.
Yep.
And that wall is a framed pennant. It's a little military tradition. And it has OC, so Officer Commanding, and has our flag colors for the squadron that I commanded there that I gave up last July. On the back of that frame is a card with like damn near 200 signatures on it.
Right.
And I remember vividly one signature and one statement, and it was from a relatively very young private. So you're talking about someone who's been in the military 3 max 4 years.
Yep.
And her statement to me was, "You inspire me every day."
Dude.
Right?
That's so
like it's almost the equivalent of your kids saying, "Daddy, I love you." Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes,
you
it
know,
is.
it's all of a sudden you're like, wow, I just made an impact like this. I wouldn't say on all 200 because there's definitely some people who aren't too happy with me, but those things happen, right? Yep. But just looking at that and remembering and seeing that, it damn near brought tears to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why. And once you start getting that, you get a feel for it, you get addicted to it, and then that fire just comes out of you.
Damn. So nowhere in there did you say anything about better, faster, cheaper, more money, nothing. It's all about service.
It's all about the people, because you know what? When you focus on them, they're the ones that's going to turn around and do those things.
Right.
Because they're the ones that are on the front lines doing it. They're the ones that are doing the sales calls. They're the ones that are running the product. They're the ones thinking about the planning. They're the ones actually building the stuff. They're the ones doing whatever. Right. You need to take care of them so they can take care of you.
Got it. So, I mean, everyone listening to this should be nodding their heads up and down, because this is agile stuff. This is the stuff that we're preaching and teaching, right? Which I wonder if it's a shock to the listeners that I didn't think a military guy would be able to teach me anything about agile, but it's fundamentals. Like, this is what leadership is. So having said that, let me ask you two last questions. Who is your ideal leader? Number one. Number two, you ask all your guys, your guests, this question. What does leadership mean? Or what is great leadership? Is that right?
What makes a great leader is what I ask.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thanks. Ideal leader, there's so many out there, and I'm a cherry picker. Someone asked me, who was the greatest mentor in your life? I'm like, I got 50.
Yeah.
Because I grab the best pieces of everybody, because we all have our flaws.
Yeah.
Right? We all have our flaws. And well, I have my flaws. I know what my flaws are. I try to work on them. It fails. I'll admit that. But what I do though is I grab them. So guys like, if I think of, really historic type guys, Winston Churchill, Teddy Roosevelt from the Second World War, those guys.
Yeah.
Right. Think about today, Barack Obama. Hello. I know there's a lot of Americans who disagree with me there, but you know what? The first black leader of the United States, and did some great things for that country as far as I'm concerned. Heck, I'd love to meet Stephen Harper. General Rick Hillier.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I can keep going. I can keep going all day, but it's basically cherry picking from all these different individuals. I'd love to get them all in the room and just sit there and like, all right, we're going to do about 20 odd hours worth of podcast interviews, folks. And, half the room kind of scratch your head and look at me and go, what's a podcast? Yeah. But those are the greatest, some of the greatest leaders out there.
And what makes a great leader?
Authenticity and humility. You gotta be authentic in what you say. You're gonna do what you say you're gonna do, and as well, you gotta be humble to say when you don't know what you don't know, and when to lean on your team.
Yes, I like it. So Scott, thank you for that. Tell the fans where they can find you, and give them the URL and the pitch and the plug and what's coming up. What's next for you?
Right. So movingforwardleadership.com, like you mentioned, is the website. If you're interested in the podcast, movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And doesn't matter what you're on, what you use for podcast player. There's the various ones there, iOS, Android, RSS, even. Excuse me. As well, you can find all my social media links at the bottom of the webpage. One thing that's not at the bottom there is my Moving Forward Leadership Mastermind, which is my free open community, which you're part of, Chris. Yep. And I go on there pretty well daily and discuss things, unless I'm uber busy. Like, keep in mind, folks, I am running a full-time job and father of two. So, and I'm doing this basically for free. So I do it the best I can, but I'm in there almost daily giving either articles or doing my own live videos like I did today, talking about, February blues and how people get down.
Yep.
So go there. That's, if you want to go there quickly, just go movingforwardleadership.com/mastermind. It'll take you right to the Facebook group. And for your listeners, two things. So one thing on every podcast that I'm a guest on, I always give this out. If you want to grab a couple free chapters of my book, The 9 Foundations of Leadership, just go to moveforwardleadership.com/download, and you'll grab those for free. You do have to give your email address so I can email it to you. But yeah, so that's moveforwardleadership.com/download. And the second thing is, you know what, Chris, just because you're such a cool cat and we have so much fun and I really appreciate you and respect you, any listener who wants a free coaching call, 30-minute coaching call, you know what, just shoot me an email. Mention Badass Agile Podcast and 30 minutes. And there's going to be no pitch at the end. There's going to be nothing. You can go ahead, run by what you're thinking, where your problem areas are, whatever you want. And then I can definitely provide you some advice and guidance and see if we can get you either moving in the right direction or, you know, pushing forward above and beyond where you're at right now. So you can either shoot me an email, scott@movingforleadership.com, or just go to the contact me page and just mention the podcast, and it's free.
Dude, that is amazing. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to take one of those 30-minute slots.
We'll do it right now.
Yeah. Well, that's right. We're going to hang up and do it now. But,
no, we'll keep it recording.
Yeah. Okay. But friends, you got to listen now. You want to catch Scott because he is a madman on the rise. Obviously, I think you can hear in his voice, he's got the fire. His podcast is great. His guests are second to none. They're first rate. He's a fellow Canadian, which, I mean, you know, that says a lot in the first place. But this is a great extra perspective. If you're a leader, you are supposed to be out there learning. You're supposed to be surrounding yourself with new sources of inspiration. Take the different viewpoints and glue them together. Figure out what is always true. Figure out what is sometimes true and build that philosophy of your own, resting on the shoulders of people like Scott who have come before us, who have put in the hours and the time and learned the lessons in the actual field of battle. Scott, I wish you continued success. You're doing a great job. I can't wait to see what happens next for you. Stay moving forward, brother. Stay badass too, right? I can't wait till the next time we get to do something together.
Well, let's hope next time it's actually in person and maybe a couple beverages in front of us.
Yeah, a juice of some kind.
Some kind.
That's right. Scott, so great to have you on the show. Thank you, my friend. I can't thank you enough for everything.
Thanks, Chris. It was super honor to be on here and talk to your audience because your podcast is badass. It does live up to its name, and I listen to it basically daily. So keep it going, keep it rolling, brother.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. It's a real honor. Take care, Scott.
Cheers, man.